Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.
All right. Hello, Get Better Faster Nation. I am Dr. Jason Bradley, and along with my co-host, the one, the only James Chester, and our incredible executive producer, Rachel Bradley, we want to welcome you to another exciting episode of the Get Better Faster podcast. Today, we're joined by a truly unique guest who bridges the worlds of music, breathwork, and healing in ways that most people never imagined possible. Ian Franklin Wilkerson is a board-certified music therapist and third-generation Reichian breathwork coach who comes from a family of healers in the Bay Area of California. With over 16 years in private practice, he's served over 1,000 clients, has completed a mind-numbing 14,000 clinical hours. I can't even believe that. Ian has a special gift for working with teens and adults struggling with emotional release through breathwork, and he's seen remarkable success with children who have autism and special needs. But he's not just a therapist. He's also a passionate singer-songwriter and guitarist who's released 6 commercial albums and has performed over 800 live concerts. His approach combines creativity, self-expression, and self-empowerment in ways that transform lives. Without further ado, Ian, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Ian, we're going to get really granular, but we're also going to have a lot of fun today. And I think the first thing that we should probably open up with is your origin story about being a third-generation Reichian therapist. Like, this stuff is in your bloodline. And I think that you being a breathwork specialist also and therapist, when did you realize that by combining breathwork and music therapy, that was your unique way of getting people better faster?
Yeah, I think that I knew when I was much younger than when I started to actually do that, when I actually started to implement that practice. I've been a board certified music therapist in clinical practice since late 2008. So almost 18 years now. And, I started out just doing, music therapy. That was my main service to others and my main engagement with healing and helping people grow. But I, like you said, I grew up in a family of healers and integrative practitioners and breath workers. And my mom, was a Reichian breathwork therapist for a long time, for 35, 40 years. And she studied with some prominent people in that field as well. And my dad's a chiropractor. I have like 10 chiropractors in my family, in my immediate family. My dad's dad was a chiropractor. My dad is a chiropractor. He just retired. And actually, my mom went to chiropractic college before she got pregnant with my sister and dropped out to be mommy. That's where my dad and my mom met. And then like my dad's sister is a chiropractor, my brother-in-law, I've got cousins, and my aunt is a chiropractor. So just tons of chiro in my bloodline. And then there's some MDs as well, and some other holistic integrative energy workers. And so I think when I first knew music was calling me was when I was 12, when I first kind of made the shift from being a young child in drama and doing mostly like theater arts. And then my Uncle Bobby gave me my first guitar, which was this really heavy BC Rich Rave electric guitar. It was like this 80s rocker guitar, but they made them so heavy back then. So it was literally like the worst guitar to play on stage with for long periods of time. But anyway, that was my first guitar. And I think he kind of opened the door to being a rocker, and that's how I first realized the power of music, was when I tapped into actually creating and learning rock and roll and jazz and blues and funk. Just by learning the repertoire of the 60s and 70s, and the Beatles and Cream and Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan and Bob Marley, and, all of those artists kind of opened me to that world of revolution through music, of feeling through music, empowerment, sovereignty, righteousness, and so I think that's when I first got my first taste of it. But yeah, go ahead.
No, was there ever a spot during your creative journey that you're ever rejected? Like knowing that you came from this healing background, was there ever a spot where you're like, gosh, I don't know if I want to go that path. I just want to be a musician.
Dude, good question because, yeah, you know, I didn't have any pressure from family to be like, oh, you gotta be a lawyer, doctor, like, you know. I was just an entrepreneur my whole childhood and my whole teenage years into early 20s because I watched my mom run her own businesses and my dad run his business. And so I had the entrepreneurial blood in me, the creator, the doer to get things done. And so I think I didn't feel that pressure of rejection, however, or of like where I had to like perform in some capacity for the sake of stature or wealth or a good career. But the thing I will say is that when I was finally at a crossroads of deciding to get off my ass and go to school, go to college, because like when I graduated high school it was 1997. And so I was working full time at Kinko's, if you remember Kinko's. And I was like working my way up to like being an assistant manager. I was all about digital production output, making manuals and brochures and programs and, you know, using Quark Express and PageMaker and Adobe for like business cards and stuff, right? So I was doing all that while rocking and rolling and then going to community college. I went to junior college just for fun. Comparative religion, mythology, marine biology, like whatever just fed my brain. But I was playing in a rock band and gigging and booking shows. And then finally, you know, I decided it's time to get my shit together. And I had a trip to Yosemite with my dad, and, you know, my dad's a chiropractor. And I basically knew I was this was at 21-ish. I finally decided to stop going to community college and go to college. And so I was looking at a few different music colleges because I knew I wanted to possibly pursue music. And then I also knew I felt very strongly pulled towards becoming a chiropractor. And it wasn't because of any like familial obligation or anything. It was because I actually experienced the beauty and love of service. And I truly, truly, genuinely embraced and integrated the prevalence of nervous system and electricity in your body and your spine and your bones and everything being in alignment. So I really, really breathed and, you know, loved chiropractic. I mean, I was adjusted the minute out the womb, you know, my dad was a chiro and stuff. So it's just been a big part of my life. And so he was like, are you going to do, I was like, Dad, I don't know if I want to go to chiropractic college or if I want to go to like rock star college, you know, because like I wasn't a classical musician, never trained classically. I was always mostly orally trained and like very traditionally trained in terms of that pedagogy. And so I was looking at Berklee College music, which is where most families send their 18-year-old children to be rock stars, full expenses paid because it's a bougie school. I mean, it's expensive, right? But also they have scholarships and like really talented people who have no money get in there and do amazing work. But nonetheless, it's like the rock star school. It's not Juilliard. And so anyway, my dad was so supportive. And to answer your question, long-winded, he just supported me in making whatever decision I wanted to make. And I decided to go to Berklee. And we had a big, deep talk about it. So, and he didn't reject my desire to be a musician or vocationally trained in some trade aspect of the industry. So I think that's such a cool story. And I love that your family supported that. I think that, I mean, everyone has their struggle, but it's amazing that you had that support to go into something like music. I think that there's so many families that it's like, yeah, doctor, lawyer, engineer, you know, fill in the blank profession. And music is a real thing. I know that in my illustrious 26 years of practice, people that utilize music in one form or another, either they're just playing, or they're taking lessons, or they learned as a kid and they tool around with it, or they're doing music therapy. I mean, it's really healthy, you know, for the psyche, for balance and for the nervous system. I think it's amazing. And we could probably talk about frequencies and frequencies of energy and all of that. But I have a question before we dive down those rabbit holes, because I mentioned that you were a third generation Reichian breathwork coach as well, as a very talented musician. What the heck is a Reichian breathwork coach? Yeah, good question. So, and this dovetails back into what James was asking about. When did I know to like merge the two? You know, when did I become a practitioner of blending breathwork with music therapy? So I did that in 2016 when my mom died. And I'm going to bring it back to there just because, to answer your question, I didn't really start practicing as a breathwork practitioner until 2016 or 2017 after she died, because she had a handful of clients who wanted to go to somebody who had her flavor, had her vibe, who had her knowledge, who had her essence and skill set. And so I just finally realized, Luke, you must fulfill your destiny. It's like time for me to follow my path. And not because I felt obligated to my mom, but because I knew that I wanted to carry on her legacy out of my devotion to the practice. So what is Reichian therapy? It's actually kind of like a loaded label or title, because the true pedagogy and like clinical practice of Reichian therapy, which is if the namesake is from Wilhelm Reich, who was an Austrian psychoanalyst, who was one of Sigmund Freud's most esteemed, promising pupils. Reich ended up being a little bit in opposition to Freud's cerebral psychoanalytical approach to the ego and the mind and the health and the pathology that we create, because Reich started to identify the prevalence of the soma, the somatic, the body, the physiology, the like manifestation of contraction and emotions and anger and rage and trauma and all the things we experience that get stored in our musculature. And then that creates more pathology and disease. And we can talk about the problems all we want and not really ever deal with the physiological manifestation of the disease. So that's who Wilhelm Reich was. And he left Freud's tutelage, and he's pretty much the Western psychoanalytical therapist forefather for like a lot of the kinesthetic modalities in the Western sense. I mean, obviously breath work is far more ancient than where he was in his era, right? Like it's Eastern, it's far ancient, it's been prevalent in all of ancient civilization, apparently. And so, but he was the Western forefather of the clinical psychoanalytical, more allopathic modality of breath work and the prevalence of breath. And he identified the energy as orgone. And like other philosophies and teachers talk about like chi and prana and other energy workers, but he called it orgone. And the modern day, truly like the people who are clinically in the allopathic sense, Reichian therapists are called orgonomists, because he gave birth to the pedagogy and the study and the practice of orgonomy. But my mom was a student of Dr. Philip Kukuruda, who was a chiropractor, and from LA, from the Valley, in San Van Nuys, that area. And so he was a student of one of Reich's students. And then he was a chiropractor. And so he brought the breath work and he brought Reich's teachings and merged it with chiropractic. And he came up with a term he called cranial sacral vegetative therapy, or I think it was cranial sacral vegetative therapy, or vegiotherapy is what he coined it. But, and he brought in the chiropractic philosophy and knowledge and blended it with breath work and physical manipulation of the body. And like things like Rolfing also came out of Reich's work, and other Western kinesthetic modalities. But anyway, that's what Reichian. So now the reason why I say it's important to know that they're orgonomists is because technically they're the ones who are carrying the torch forward from the scholastic university entitled, not in a bad way entitled, but like the credentialed practice, right? And we live in such a quantitative world now that everybody wants the piece of paper behind the practice, even if it's like an ancient lineage of knowledge that's passed down in the family, which is where I come into it, because I'm just breathing what I grew up in and what I know in my innate blood. I am board certified as a music therapist, but as a breathwork practitioner, it wouldn't be proper for me to call myself an orgonomist. And I don't even want to call myself a Reichian therapist because I don't have my LMFT and I'm not a PsyD. But, I am living and breathing it, and since I was a baby. And so I call myself a breathwork coach because I'm a coach. I know breathwork, and I know how to do it, hold space. I know how to be there and support people's process. So I think
I didn't know anything about that. And I'm curious to hear James, James knows everything about chiropractic. He's not a chiropractor, but I think the gentleman knows everything that there is to know about chiropractic. So I'd love to hear, James, have you heard of this?
No, it's my first time hearing about the somatic work of the craniosacral systems with breathwork, and specifically the Reichian model. This is my first time hearing anything about the Reichian method. And that's when you first introduced Ian as a guest. I was like, this is going to be dynamic because I'm going to uncover some ideas that are going to advance my knowledge skills to help more people understand this profession better, because chiropractic is a science, philosophy, and an art, and the practitioner is the artist. And what they deliver through their care method is the artistic expression. So how you play an instrument, chiropractors are actually reversing the tune of the body and retuning the body holistically through reestablishing the pattern within the nervous system to play the nervous system to make the person's body emit health. So really what you're doing is helping realign the alignment of people's consciousness within their bodies. And what a chiropractor does is they do the adjustment to the vertebrae, taking the pressure off the disc and the nervous system, allowing the body to flow the way it's supposed to. So what chiropractors do is tune the human body as an instrument, and it allows it to play the way it's supposed to. When it's kinked, I use this analogy a lot. It's like if Jimi Hendrix was playing the Star Spangled Banner and his key was in the wrong tune for like string number 4 on his guitar, it wouldn't sound anything like it was supposed to. It wouldn't express the instrument wouldn't express the music the way it was supposed to sound. So the way I understand chiropractic is chiropractors tune the nervous system and they allow the body to play music the way it's supposed to be unencumbered and not to have the basically the bondage of illness inside of it. So it releases that and allows the body to heal naturally. We believe that we need nothing extra in us, simply no interference. When we clear the interference, the body self-regulates and self-heals. So when all that is true, now the body's representing life force and lightness. And I think it's really cool what you're teaching us is because the breath work, there's so many times when a patient is laying down to get the adjustment and they're holding their breath and the segment won't move. So if they take a deep breath and they get it all into their lungs and they release it, and then the chiropractor does their artistic expression of the adjustment, the body releases much easier. We also believe that when the body's in a state of ease, there's no dis-ease. So when you correct that vertebral subluxation, the body goes into what the medical world calls as homeostasis. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, case by case, and the categorical types of people that you help with, because there is an overlaying from your upbringing to your music career to the idea that somatic breathing is going to be something that eases people's bodies and gets them back to balance again so that they can play themselves like the instrument that they were intended to sound like.
I love that.
Beautiful.
So thank you for asking me that, Jason, because I think there is like a huge depth of knowledge when it comes to the way I see the healing art of chiropractic and the way that it integrates with somebody like Ian Franklin Wilkerson's work as well.
I totally agree. And James, thank you for, that was like poetry almost,
Yeah,
I like,
beautiful.
I like
The
body is an instrument, and somehow anyway, I was going to make a joke about playing myself or anyway, I'm going to leave it alone. Anyway,
actually, that's going to be prevalent in the moment. So
nice. So I was thinking when you were talking, Ian, when you were talking about that where Reich was jumping in and connecting not just with the consciousness and the brain and the subconscious and all that, but also incorporating that into the physical body, the corporal body. I was thinking about this book, and I'm sure you've heard of it, and everybody's heard of it these days, but The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And basically, just for our listeners that might not be familiar with that, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. The body keeps score. Our thoughts, our consciousness, our stressors, all of that locks itself in the body. And there are somatic expressions or body expressions of the stressors that we're under. And I'm going to pitch this right over to you to get your thoughts on that. But I want to step back for a minute and go back almost 30 years. And I was in a conference. I couldn't remember where, but I know who was speaking. It was Dr. Jeffrey Bland. And Dr. Bland is the person that came up with the word functional medicine, which is what I've been practicing for the last 26 years. Combining, naturopathy and chiropractic and general medicine and everything else I can to just help get the people better faster, as quick as we can. But Bland was speaking at a medical conference where mostly it was family practice doctors. And he said something very casually that created an uproar. He said that if the general practice doctor or the regular traditional doctors are not addressing stress, and that's the word that he used, every single visit, in his opinion, it should be considered malpractice. And it was an uproar. I have never been before or since in a scene like this. It was right out of a movie. People stood up. They were slamming their hands down on the table and yelling that that's not real science. And, we're doctors and we leave that to the psychologists and the psychiatrists. And, just absolutely this post-Cartesian theory that the body and the mind are separate, separate from each other. And Bland stood his ground. And it's interesting because I think it was this was 30 years ago. I think about 20 years later, about 10 years ago, American Academy of Family Practice in their journals were posting, hey, did you know that about 90% of what comes through your door is probably rooted in stress? And I was thinking, man, what if we would have listened 2 decades earlier? And quite frankly, they're still not listening. There's still a big divide in general medicine and the connection between the mind and the body, right? So where I'm going with all of this is that it's interesting to me that someone like yourself that's trained in music therapy and helping to tune that body, as James was saying, and integrating the breath and integrating the brain, the subconscious, the consciousness with that somatic expression, that body expression. I think it's really curious to me that, you've been doing this for so long, you've logged, all these hours and had all these cases. So how does general medicine accept what you're doing? Or what's been your history with just the regular old run-of-the-mill doctor down the road? Yeah,
super good question. It's only more recently becoming more and more embraced and accepted, or even acknowledged and identified as an option for people. Again, in the Western Americans, in the USA, like World War II, World War I, like that era, that time frame is when like minstrels were traveling through veterans' homes, and like that's like one of the textbook versions of like when it started to emerge as a practice that could help people's PTSD and such, and rehabilitatively. But even it's really becoming more embraced as there's more research and more quantitative data, right? We are such a data-driven people in terms of our being materialistically minded. We need to see quantitative evidence as to efficacy and why it's happening, and that's great, and I think that's important also. But I'd say within the last 10 years, it's gotten even more recognition, but still it's inadequate. It's not enough. Like insurance carriers only if you've got like the top dollar insurance companies, you're working for some company that's like, yeah, dude, all expenses paid, we'll cover anything for your family. But most policies won't reimburse it. And
it's that Hollywood insurance that you're talking about. The movie. I don't know that people know, but the Hollywood movie insurance for people actually working for those studios, everything's paid for. It's amazing insurance, but we don't see that. We don't really see that in the other
or like families that are working for Google or Facebook, or in Silicon Valley who have like super top dollar in coverage. Those families can get music therapy covered, but it does have CPT codes. Like it's those diagnostic codes that are reimbursable by insurance, for like sensory integration or occupational needs or, bilateral motor growth or whatever. Like there's all these specific discrete data points that they can reimburse for, but most insurance companies still push a lot of pushback and decline the coverage. So that right there is telling about how much it's accepted in the allopathic, MD world. Occasionally I'll get a client inquiry that's like, oh yeah, our MD wrote a script, or like our primary care like actually wrote an order for music therapy, and so we're looking for it, but it's very seldom still.
So I guess as you guys are talking about the acceptance model. How do people find you?
Well, more like, generally speaking, it's people find it's a very niche healthcare field, or it's a very service, and so for me, when they find me, I've been blessed. Even though I would rather there be more of us and it be a more common field than scarce, but there's not a lot of therapists, and so they find me pretty easily by word of mouth and Google search engines, DuckDuckGo, or it's like I have great SEO, and so does any music therapist in any region if you dial in the SEO, because if anybody types in music therapist, Albuquerque, New Mexico, like whoever's a registered music therapist with a business and a website or a handle or some presence in Albuquerque, New Mexico, those keywords are going to find the 5 people or the 2 people, or, maybe in some areas 10, but there's just not a lot, or maybe in some areas none. There's not a lot of us. And it's, in fact, as some business owner who, it's hard to find applicants. But that's how they find me, is I get lots of hits off search engine, Google, been doing it for almost 18 years now. So I have tons of word of mouth referrals. And again, it's growing in the news. There's news stories that come out, and then people are like, oh, I could try that for my kiddo, or, oh, my husband had a TBI and I saw this news story on ABC, and I'm going to whoa, is there a music therapist? And so where I live, and so they'll find us that way. I think just word of mouth is the biggest one.
So delivery of care. I'm really curious about that, because I've never been to a music therapist. I should do it. It sounds like something pretty dynamic and interesting, and it could integrate some different parts of people's life. And I think that what we don't know, we don't know. And like I tell people all the time, if they know what we know, they do what we do. So a lot of people are going to, like you said, they're catching on. But the delivery method, does somebody have to be in a brick and mortar facility with you? Do you do this through Zoom? How do you help people with your breath work and with your music therapy?
So it's the delivery method is as universal and ubiquitous as music is in all facets of life and everything that is in humanity and in nature. Like, it is so everywhere, right? Like, music is out in the forest when you just quiet your voice and mind and listen to the birds and the trees and the wind and the running water. Like music is in our breath, and right, and there's like rhythm to our body and our physiology and even to our thoughts, and like this, it's all there. So I guess the delivery system, right now it's brick and mortar. There's music therapists who have clinics that are brick and mortars where people come into your clinic and they see you. There's also 90% of my practice and my company's practice that has 5 music therapists, employee music therapists. We are 90% out in the community. We are traveling into people's homes to work with a child who has autism, and we're serving the family. We are going into day programs with 25 adults with various IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, or cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome, or the whole special needs demographic. We're going into group homes with 5 adults with special needs. We're going into neuro rehab clinics working on brain injury. We are going into psychiatric acute settings with locked units, working with the super sick with schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder and like heavily medicated individuals. We are in this is my company. There's just all these settings.
That's just your company.
Yeah, but I mean, because like we're not in pediatrics, like most hospitals employ their own in-house music therapists, but there are a lot of music therapists working in hospitals, in children's hospitals, and they're usually working through like child life services, or some of them come in through oncology or rehab, but most of the time it's through child life services as like the portal, the funding department within the hospital. And then my company is also at like teen treatment homes where like teens go there with suicidal ideation and eating disorders or OCD, like mild to moderate mental health challenges, and substance abuse, and they're there for like 45 days, and they're like in an intensive rehab with like DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and a counselor and a psychologist and a dietitian, and yoga comes in, and they do equine therapy, and then and they have a music therapist. So yeah, that's just, I could probably keep going. Oh, we're in memory care units. We're in geriatric, older adult communities, skilled nursing, assisted living, and memory care. We're literally everywhere music touches people. So, we're in the community. We're at the park facilitating group drum circles and fostering community.
So real life application, many types of people that are receiving your services, and there's no boundaries, no borders, no limitations.
No, exactly. Totally.
I really appreciate that too. And I have a wish for all of us that we saw more integrative therapies in the general practice of healthcare. I also wish there was more health and care in healthcare. But that's more political statement. Hey, I have a question. So I love what you said, and I love the integration. But I'm wondering, and I love the people that you're seeing now, but what do you think the biggest emotional and physical blockages that people are struggling with that traditional medicine is missing? Where really can music therapy, breathwork coaching dovetail in? What are you seeing that they're missing, and how can we integrate it more?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is playfulness and whimsy. And the reason why I feel like healthcare is missing that is because we're so mechanistic in our quantitative need for proof and wellness that we lose sight of like the being and the person, like the humanism of the person. And so for me, like the play and the whimsy, that clinical tool, that ingredient of facilitating and supporting and eliciting a greater sense of playfulness and whimsy, it brings us back to that childhood, that childlike innocence of health, optimal health, of where we haven't been adulterated yet. We haven't been toxified. We haven't been, we've just been, we're pure out the womb, right? Except for whatever ancestral baggage we come in with, but, which is freaking huge in my opinion too. So not to discredit the prevalence of that, but I say playful and whimsy because I feel like the empowerment piece, like when you talked, James, about chiropractic philosophy and, waking up our innate capacity for homeostasis. That's a big part of the work I do in music therapy and in breathwork is that nervous system alignment, the homeostasis. Well, what we start to lose as we become more pathological is we start to lose that playfulness, that whimsy. And I feel like when we can bring that playfulness and whimsy back into our world, we can give our bodies and our nervous system and our physiology and our cells and everything gets our mitochondria. They get the opportunity to be playful and whimsical and like love and surrounded with joy. And that's the best, I guess weapon against stress, right? Is like, I'm freaking stressed out all the time. If I could just find I've been doing breathwork my whole life and getting adjusted by chiropractors and I'm still overwhelmed and overcome with stress. And that is going to be, if anything's going to be that to me, that's going to be what does me in too, because, but I love opportunities to play. So if there's one thing that practitioners are missing, it's playfulness, whimsy, which leads into the opportunity for sovereignty and empowerment, for homeostasis, for mitochondrial physiological happiness, for joy. I mean,
I want to jump in for a brief moment because it sounds like you're onto something here. Yeah. And the philosophy that I stand in, as Dr. Jason was saying earlier, he's a chiropractor, 26 years, functional medicine practitioner, 26 years. So also degree in journalism and media framing. So podcasting is something that's really special for me to include him into, because I believe that podcasting is something of therapy, because it's idea therapy. It's a way for people to get information that they didn't have access to before and elevate the consciousness of our culture with guests like yourself talking about things that people have no awareness about. So I believe that amplifying the message from my esteemed colleague and doctor on this podcast with you as the music breathwork therapist, the fundamentals that Jason was allowing me to speak on earlier were these. We believe that when man or woman, the spirit, physical gets adjusted, connects them to man or woman, the spiritual. So now we're connecting physical with spiritual. And then once those two are connected, it creates the educated intelligence. So it's a very smooth triune. We have the physical, the spiritual, and the educated. And what you're doing is you're taking people through this musical breathwork journey, and you're creating this homeostasis pathway that you're talking about, which creates the educated intelligence. You transform them from where they were, and you develop them into a new version of themselves. And the reason that Jason was asking you about providers supporting this, and he was saying that there's no health in healthcare. Well, there's no money in healthy people. So it makes sense that an insurance policy wouldn't support people going through this type of a care plan with you. But when you think about the significance of what you do, I just had a thought flash over here, and I'm like, what if you take your integrations and you put them on recordings for people, and you let people use them as a meditative state where people could actually like have the download and listen to and do the breath work at the same time as a apparatus system that people could then walk around and chill out. And like you're talking about having whimsical moments, but also meditative moment, and also the self-healing moment where you don't need a therapist on duty all the time, but you have basically the titration of the effect. Now you're giving people the method to do it. They titrate it over time, and eventually they become a different element. And that's really what we do with the ideas that we get. We get enough knowledge that's inside of us, and then we become a different version of ourselves over time, and that's called wisdom. So really what you're doing is you're developing the wisdom strength inside of somebody's body to adapt. And adaptation is really the most important part of being in this human body. Is if we don't feel good, we need to adapt to feeling better, right? And if we're not feeling well, we want to adapt to feeling better, right? So it sounds like your approach is very much on the linear perspective of the body needs nothing extra in it, simply needs no interference. When we clear the interference, the body self-heals and self-regulates. And that's exactly what you're doing, brother.
Yeah, man. I'm still trying to figure out how to package that, this idea of, just to like discuss the multitude of ways in which music shows up in healing and as an art, as a healing art is there's the sound healing world. So there's a whole pedagogy and study of sound, and the psychoacoustics and the quantum mechanics and the way sound impacts the body's physiology and cells and the energy and all that, right? And that's huge and very prevalent. And there's schools for that, right? Like if you want to go become a sound healing practitioner or a credentialed, with a degree in sound healing, you can get that. And then there's also the pedagogy and the scholastic world of music therapy. And music therapy also, they can work in tandem, but there's different pedagogies. And one of the reasons why is because music therapy, like the degree I got and the study I do is more of and this is going to be challenging because the reality of it is that what I'm about to say, they're both the same, but in music therapy, it's more interactive. It's more about engaging on a more observable, creative and interactive, expressive way, meaning my work, clinical work, is like making music with people, getting them to play the drum, them to be engaged in a robust and affective state, them to be writing their own songs, them to be using the creativity and expression that is innate in them, or if it's been subdued and quieted, to uncap that and to unlock it and to empower them to find that whimsical, playful creativity that they can use as an art, right? So my work is very much interactive and maybe like 10% passive. And when I say passive, if you really break shit down to like the quantum mechanical and the cellular level, even when you're working with a sound healer, if you're doing a sound bath, which is a different pedagogy than what I do incorporate some sound bath work, and I do some music assisted relaxation and meditation. But it's important for me to bring that difference up in my work because there's other practitioners who are like straight up sound healers, and they do the crystal bowls and the gongs and they do the tuning forks, and it's more passive observably with our eyes, because the people receiving it, the patients, the clients, they're laying down, they're breathing, they're meditating, and they're receiving this huge, like beautiful blanket of sound and acoustics and vibrational waves. And there's that spiritual context and the physiological metabolic context. But it's passive because it's not like they're jamming and making music and stuff, but there's still a lot of movement and interactive going on the micro. But I just wanted to bring that up because that's part of the hard part for me in trying to reach more people in service, which is my life's mission, is to help more people. And it's hard for me to create like an interactive video that I can like have people subscribe to or give out for free, and just, to have like, hey, have time with Ian, but then I can scale my impact on humanity like the way a lot of people do with their video recordings, and then people download them and then they can reach hundreds of thousands of people with this meditative practice. But because my work, I'm still trying to figure out how to like detach the need for me to be physically interactive in a reciprocal loop with the person, because my work is always guided. How I show up to help somebody in breath work or music therapy, it's guided by the feedback loop. It's guided by the relational, reciprocal, what I see, what's before me, what's the energy, how am I going to respond to that in real time? I'm going to make my adjustment this way. I'm going to pull this tool out of my bag of supports and interventions, and I'm going to change this. And now we're going into a G minor because, man, this person was not jiving with the G major. So we're going to make it a minor third now, and we're going to just flip the script. And oh man, they were not digging the folk. So we're going to go into some hardcore punk rock. And, and this is all about like, if we're making music and we're what we call clinically improvising. So I wanted to break that down. Wow. I wish I could package it up and be like, hey, subscribe to me.
Listen, I just want to jump in too and give James props here, because while James is a world-renowned podcaster with the largest podcast dedicated to chiropractic in 2 different languages, Spanish and English, Chiro Hustle. If you haven't checked out his other show, listeners, please do. It's brilliant. But James is also a brilliant marketer. And I think the 3 of us on this call, all that we want to do is help as many people as possible. I know that my impetus is, like when we talk about scaling, a business, I think that we're all talking about what's the impact I can have on humanity? What's the legacy I can leave behind? And James has a unique talent for putting those things together. So I don't want to, volunteer James, but he has this great call that he does called the $1 million. What's it called? The $1 million call, right?
I do something called the $1 million call for people.
Yeah. And it really distills this down. Anyway, I'm just putting that out there for you and for other listeners as well. The other thing that I wanted to bring, we're talking about pedagogy and teaching and, all these different aspects that we can, philosophies and kind of theories, but I want to bring it home for a couple in one really distinct way, and then bring it into PTSD. I was thinking about stress and the stress response. And I was thinking specifically about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve that, everyone talks about, we gotta I don't know, tune the vagus nerve. I'm going to have you guys help me out with the right words here. But one of the cool things that I know about the vagus nerve, and about, stimulating relaxation and tone, vagus nerve tone is where I'm going with this. Vagus nerve tone is that it responds really well to something really simple like humming. And just humming music and humming sound. And I really like the idea of sound inducing a relaxation state, stimulating the parasympathetic nerves, tonifying that vagus nerve. I really appreciate that. And specifically where I want to go with this is I have, I don't know if a penchant is the right word, but definitely a passion for helping those that are struggling with PTSD. I have struggled with PTSD probably as long as I can remember. I don't need counseling today, but if you want to dive into my dark childhood, we certainly can. But nonetheless, I think that so many of us struggle with this, and then we carry it, and the body keeps score, and it compounds and it compounds and it compounds. And God knows that the world itself is stressful, not only these days, but it has been for decades and decades. And I would love to hear, moving away from the theory, moving away from the teaching aspects and the philosophies, how does something like music therapy and breath work intersect with and affect PTSD? How can it help PTSD?
Yeah, big. We could talk about that for hours. Mm-hmm. So I think that the first ingredient to the music therapy is access, or because music is so innate in us that it's oftentimes can be one of the most accessible modalities. It's fun, right? Like if you can get past the insecurity, I mean, there's other things that can come up that keep us away from accessing like that whimsy and that playfulness, because sometimes we have to relearn, or we have to unlearn and then relearn how to be able to lean into that creativity or that joyful music making. But I think that the main ingredient, even on a neurological and physiological anatomical level, is the way music actually interfaces with our physiology and the neurological aspect of how when we're making music, every part of the brain fires. It's one of the only human functions where the brain is actually like a fireworks show, right? Like both hemispheres are optimized, they're bridged, all of the regions of the brain are activated when we make music. Whereas like other human functions, it's just like it's maybe just a localized area of neuronal activity that you can actually see on a screen if you're measuring neural activity. When you make music, boom, your brain's just alight, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's so effective with PTSD, is that it opens up interactive collaboration and communication between our memory banks and our rhythm centers and our speech and our pain centers and our all of those things. And so I think it's a ripe space for us to be working on that hard stuff. And music also like spreads the whole gamut of the nervous system's experience. So from fight or flight to trauma, like all of these different areas of music can trigger those feelings in our body.
That's fascinating.
Yep.
And when you said both hemispheres are firing with full integration, and you said when you make music, the brain is alight and alive. And I love that idea, but it makes me think this is probably why we such a response, not only in PTSD, but also first of all, I want to just clarify, I don't like diagnoses. I think it's a box that we like to put people in. And I'm just using vernacular here to move us along so we don't get caught up in trying to describe things. But nonetheless, PTSD, when you were saying that, full integration, both hemispheres firing, the music makes the brain come alive and is a light. It also makes me think that's probably why we see such good responses with people classically diagnosed on the spectrum, on ASD, autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge support, and in neuro rehab, in building new neural net pathways. Like absolutely, both in the neurodivergent community and working with people on the spectrum, and also in PTSD. It's super effective in helping an individual just co-regulate their nerve to have a regulated nervous system. So we've mentioned the prevalence of the nervous system and stress so many times. If you're a kiddo who's on the spectrum and has super intense sensory challenges, or like he's uncomfortable in their body and their nervous system, and there's a musical experience that can help facilitate some degree of regulation in the body, who can try to like grow academically or grow socially and functionally when your nervous system is just on fire, right? So it really can help quiet that or regulate that system, so that opportunities for learning and growing, or opportunities for connecting to other people and feeling that sense of connection and relationship can blossom. So that music can super be helpful in that.
Well, I have a tie-in here, because we're talking about delivering people that have some type of concern, right? We're talking about taking them from where we found them and giving them solutions and helping them on a new pathway. Do you ever take into inventory what somebody's listening to? Like their frequencies of what type of music they're actually like? Is there frequent like behavior music? Like, what do they listen to in the mornings? What do they listen to like throughout their day? What are their playlists? And do you ever like realize that they're listening to like really junk frequencies, and you have to tell them that the frequencies that they're tuning themselves with are just like junk, and you got to get rid of it and you got to do new stuff?
No, so there's that study with that scientist. I forget his name. I'm just spacing, but he did all the water molecules, and like if you put the love and the beautiful affirmations on the water, the molecules were like super beautiful, and like if you put like demonic, hateful messages on the water, they became all decrepit and gross. And I do believe there's a huge prevalence to that, James. I'm sorry. Go ahead, James.
Masaru Emoto.
Yes, Emoto. Thank you. I was just lost in thought. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Google. So, but the thing is, James, it's scaffolding. Okay. So yes, I do firmly believe that what we listen to and what we surround ourselves in can have a great impact on us in negative ways and positive ways. However, I also always go with client preferred, patient preferred music, because you have to start somewhere, and we have to start with what makes somebody happy. Where do they find, where's their buy-in? Where's their joy? You know, and the reason I want to break it down that way is because I've worked with people who actually feel like their nervous system, actually, I bet you I haven't hooked them up onto like, you know, sensors and stuff, but I bet you in this instance, what I'm about to say is that like I've had clients who find calmness and who find a sense of grounding and co-regulation with their experience in their world and their sensory system when they put on Slayer or Motorhead, you know, or like Black Death cult music or whatever, you know, like I'm never going to tell somebody that like, I'm never going to be prescriptive. I'm not going to say, and I don't think that music it's too nuanced and it's too unique to every person's experience and memories and how their cellular mitochondrial system and their spirit and their soul and their physiology has actually connected in what way to what kind of music, because I want them to feel stoked to make music, to play the drum, to learn an instrument, to activate all of the centers in their brain that respond so positively to music, to their own neural priming opportunity. It's neural priming. How can we prime our body and our physiology through music making, okay? Or from experiencing music and as a sound bath or whatever. And so it really starts with like client preferred music. I'm not going to have a kid come in who hates Raffi and I'm going to be like, oh, yo, you want to work on some impulse control and like boundary setting, or like you want to work on bilateral coordination because you've got some vestibular and proprioceptive challenges, but you hate Raffi, but too bad, we're going to do, you know, I like to eat bananas the whole session. And it doesn't matter that you don't like it because it's got a frequency that's tuned to 432 hertz. So it's going to be better. No way. I'm going to do the song they want to do. If they want to do Itsy Bitsy and it happens to be a song that's tuned in a frequency that, you know, psychoacoustic scholars and researchers have been identifying that these frequencies are better for the for the metabolism or the physiology, and like that I have to do songs in that way. No, what's more important is their experience and their relationship to the music. And people, it's preferred music. If they feel at peace with Slayer, then you know what? We're going to be doing a Slayer song and we're going to be having a good time. And then maybe eventually down the road in our therapeutic relationship and in our rapport, we will get to a place where we can start to peel away the onion, bring in the breath work, look at the nervous system, take a deeper dive, and then maybe we do retune the Slayer song to 432 hertz. Or maybe we do bring in the sound bowls, but it's really scaffolding, bro, and the buy-in is paramount, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I just think, you know, as a person, if I hear some music that I don't like, I'm like, turn that off.
Yeah. Totally. James, we're going to work on your neuro rehab. We have to listen to that song.
That sounds like noise to me.
I remember very distinctly, James and Rachel and I were driving and we were on a very sketchy road with just a very sketchy mountain road. And I had some music on. I don't remember what it was, but it was just regular music to me. And James we have it on video. It's so great. James very quietly says, I said something about music and he's like, we can turn that off. I don't need any more stimulation right now. And I thought it was very funny. But, you know, speaking of what we're talking about, I pride myself in being a very amateur guitar player, self-taught, mostly by ear. I can kind of read chords now. I mean, not complex chords. I have to keep everything very simple. But I've been playing since I was 6. You'd think that I was better than I am. And I can, you know, get through most non-complex music and kind of figure it out. That all said, what I love about it when I'm playing, and I always say it's a good day if I get to play the guitar. And I really try to every single day because I call it my Zen moment. What I mean by that is, and James gave me this other language. It's present time consciousness for me. I'm just good enough that I can play and get through music and all that, but I'm not that good that I can't think about it. So because I have to kind of concentrate on what I'm doing, I have no time to think about stuff in the past that I might get depressed about, or I have no time to think about the future and be anxious about it because I have to be in that present time. It's the only thing that works for me. It's one of the only things that actually brings me into that present time consciousness for an extended period of time. And it's also one of the coolest things that brings me playfulness and whimsy and joy, because I'm never going to be the artist that you are playing, 800 shows and having 6 albums under my belt. But I'll play backup. I'll play backup guitar, or even better, I can play a triangle. But only in Chuck Wagon, dinner's ready style, just back and forth there. But as far as that present time, I'm not funny. My wife says, "Don't quit your day job." As far as that present time consciousness goes, I feel like that's probably also a big part of what we're talking about. I mean, if we can help people get out of that stress state and just be present, just be here in this moment, it's probably has a lot to do with neurosynaptic development and neuroplasticity and, reprogramming and all that. But yeah, what's your experience with that? Am I off in left field, or am I onto something?
No, you're totally there, man, because it brings us closer to that homeostasis, to that innate intelligence. If we're not in that present state, then our body is not being given the empowerment and the opportunity to lean into health. Right. So, and I just want to say like that, this is, I love you in sign language. And this is one of my mom's mottos. So whenever somebody says something that like resonates, I'm like, boom. So when you were saying about music being one time you're in present consciousness, and it's very much like that for me. I'm such a doer. I'm always going. I'm always do. I'm a super busy guy. And I very seldom, except for when I do my own breathwork practice, the only 2 times is when I do my own breathwork practice and when I'm playing music. And I've always said, like, I'm not a good meditator, like Joe Dispenza style meditation. Like I'm like, boom, my thoughts are going. I'm like, but when I'm doing my breathwork sessions, just breathing, and when I'm doing when I'm jamming with my band or playing guitar, that's my meditation. Like that's my music is where I come to that present consciousness. So, and I think that like that's a very telling and appropriate, it's very appropriate in helping to explain and justify why healing through music and breath is so powerful, is that it activates all regions of the brain and it brings our nervous system into regulation, and it empowers and supports that playfulness and that childlike health and nimbleness, being nimble, and the spontaneity of making music and letting go. So in terms of rehab, like I've done a lot of, you brought in the neurosynaptics and the neuroplasticity. Music therapy is really prevalent, really prevalent in neuro rehab because of the way that it activates the brain alike. So areas of the brain that have been damaged can be reactivated optimally. It's like neural priming. When we start to make music, we start to wake up those areas that are damaged, and we're not fixing those disconnected wires. We're just giving the brain the medicine it needs and the experience that it needs to reroute a new neural net pathway around the damaged one. So, when somebody's speech center has been damaged, those neural net pathways, they're gone. Like you're not going to patch that physically, the actual neurosynaptic connection, but you can grow, or the pathways, but you can grow new ones. And the reason why being in music is so effective in doing that is because it activates all of these areas of the brain. So for example, the speech area for speaking might have been damaged, but you can still physically and anatomically produce words verbally through song, because the words have a different way to be manifested through the body's mouth through song, because it's a different part of the brain and it supports that speech. And then you generalize that skill. So as you sing the words, you start to give the brain the aha, and you start to grow the new neural net pathways around the area that was damaged, because the other areas of the brain that had correlative or associated functionality empower that damaged area to grow again. And so you start to regrow the speech center. So that's how that works for music. And just in a small example, or motorically, like if you're learning how to walk again, you can use music to help your vestibular and your proprioceptive, because our internal rhythm, our rhythm centers are at the most primitive part of our brainstem. And so like, there's just all this neurological prevalence in terms of how music interacts with neuroplasticity. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but I get it and I feel it. And I've seen the prevalence of the work in my own clinical practice without being a neuroscientist. So
I love that you're, we're in tune there. But, I think it's interesting because we've talked a lot about rhythms, and the body really does have a lot of rhythm. We've talked about, brain waves, waves are a rhythm. We've talked about there's a circadian rhythm, a diurnal rhythm, night and day. We talk about a heartbeat. I mean, it's a beat. I mean, we have all of these rhythms and beats inside of us. And I find it just super fascinating that we can tap into
the pulse.
A pulse. We have a pulse. I mean, a pulse. I mean, we have so much that we can tap into just physiologically. No wonder when we add in, music or these frequencies,
muscle tone.
The muscle tone, all of it. We have like the language that we use to describe the body is almost musical. It's almost like it is an instrument, James. I'm going back to what you talked about earlier. So thank you, Ian, for sharing, all of that. Speaking of everything that we just mentioned, I'd love for you to share. I don't know if it has to be a complex case. I like complex cases. That's what I do. My claim to fame is that I take, the worst of the worst, the hardest, the most complex cases. And I try to, help people figure that out and put, piece together dots and patterns that other people aren't seeing. I'd love to have you talk us through a difficult case that came your way. How you intervened with breathwork, music therapy, and then what were the outcomes?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to use a case study. It's one of my longest standing clients. He's a young man now. And it's probably a really long story, but just basically like I started working with him when he was 12, and he's a young man now. He's 22. 23. And so I've been working with him for over 10 years. And when I first started working with him, and he's on the spectrum. So I first started working with him, he's probably moderate on the spectrum. There's this, mild, moderate, severe. So he's probably moderate, but he's verbal and, but definitely impacted in terms of his capacity to function in, society in terms of like learning and growing and, regulation and impulse control and cognitive development and all that stuff. And so I started working with him in music therapy in a very childlike, playful capacity, a lot of improvisation, and then that grew, and a lot of improvisation and a lot of like spontaneous, robust, affective, interactive music making that was all improvised, and theater and drama and play through songs, and preferred scripting from shows that he likes, because he would script and perseverate on melodies or dialogue from scripts of cartoons he liked. And so it started out in kind of that playful area of engaging and building that therapeutic rapport, the therapeutic relationship in music therapy, in a very clinical capacity, a clinical improvisational capacity. And so the first thing that we saw in that was just the ability for that experience to reorient and help him co-regulate with me, and to help him, refocus his energy into a meaningful reciprocal engagement that wasn't just perseverative scripting of a show he liked, but that was like spontaneously appropriate in conversation or in musical conversation. So where it's very clear that there's a reciprocal, aha, he went to doom boom boom boom, and I went a do do da, and then he did a do zagaboo, and so you have this opportunity to create dialogue that's organic and like a conversation that isn't scripted and isn't rigid and isn't OCD like or whatever, So that's how it kind of started out in our relationship. And then that grew into him being regulated enough to have the capacity to start developing some skill sets in music, like, having some goals that are specific to, like, let's learn piano and let's learn a specific drum beat, because now we're at this place in our relationship where he can regulate enough to try to understand these complex systems of the language of music. And he had already developed such a strong relationship of love and connection and safety and feeling the trust of leaning into music, that he was able to now use it as a tool for the next stage of scaffolding into his learning and growth opportunity and homeostasis ultimately. So then, so we started learning piano and drums, and like through that process, he's growing all kinds of domains and faculties in his executive functioning and motoric system, being able to bilateral play and create organized beats in time and space, using his body in that way. And then, on the piano, learning how to visual tracking and motor processing and eye-to-hand coordination and all these areas. But of course, the process and the fun and the playfulness always was paramount, is always first. And all of these other things are just like the icing on the cake, baby. Like, these things just grow because we're having a good time and we're focused on the process. I'm not using music he doesn't like. I'm not making him fit into my box. I'm not putting my opinions on how he should do stuff. I'm letting him lead the experience, right? So, and then I'm facilitating and coaching and mentoring, but I'm really trying to empower him to take leadership in his own process. And then, we can work together through his teen years. And all the while, he just keeps gaining more independence. And now he's, and so now fast forward, and and then halfway through our time together, I started to be able to bring in some breathwork. And this is such a perfect little case study for me, because it really was this opportunity to where what started out as perhaps this textbook version, if you will, of how music therapy can work with kiddos on the spectrum, and how it can functionally support their growth. And then it shows the evolution, my work with him, into a young man who's able to actually start focusing on wellness in that sense, where he's not just worrying about, he's not just focusing, our relationship doesn't just focus now on functional executive functioning stuff and ADLs and how to live and be in society and how to all of those things are super prevalent still. But, now we're working on bigger, whole life independence and wellness, and we're bringing in breath, and we're doing deep breathwork sessions where he's, still learning how to tap into being an emotional person, and to be empowered and validated to be emotional. But all of this is still supporting his ability to try to be independent, to live in his own home and not have to live with his parents, and to be able to deal with the stressors and the rigors of society and the unpredictability of missing a bus, or your meal not coming out the way you thought you wanted it, or all of these things that can be triggers to him. We're working on his resilience, his distress tolerance, his ability to actually stay regulated and be cool with missing his bus, moving on to the next thing, and his ability to not be scripting out in society and making people feel uncomfortable, because sometimes people don't feel comfortable standing at the bus stop when there's somebody that's looping on the perseveration of scripting. So it's how do we help him feel not, and so through all of this, bringing in breath work, music learning, we're still doing music learning, we're still doing guitar, still doing piano, still learning how to play the drums. Now he can play 4 instruments. He's playing bass, he's playing guitar, and he's laying down and doing an hour straight of breath work with me. And I only have a few clients that have this trajectory. That this profound of a, because the sad truth is that it's hard for people to stick with stuff. And I'm not a one-stop shop. That's the part where I have a hard time packaging it, right? Because I'm oh, here's this prescription. You got this feeling here. Check out my song and you're good. No, it's a process. And my mom had breathwork therapy clients who she saw for 20, 30 years. And it's a process. You are always undoing the hurt, the trauma, the stress. Anyway, so this guy from 12 years old to 22-year-old young man now, and he's on the verge of getting placed in some independent living. Finally, hopefully, eventually, the next maybe year or so, I hope he continues to grow towards being able to live independently. He's working on being able to hold a job, you know, and just function. And it's all been through music and now breath, man. And like, I'm so proud of him. So that's the full spectrum right there, man.
I think that's a beautiful story. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that gives a lot of our listeners hope. I mean, like I said, the world's a complicated place right now, and there's complicated cases that are out there. I want to spin that just a little bit, and kind of look at the shadow work of that as well. If you'll let me go there. Emotions, tapping into emotions can be scary, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Cause we're taught, to hold our cards tightly, don't share our thoughts, don't express or be your true self. There's a lot of maneuvering, and I don't want to say games that people play, but it's a strange world. As an example, our older daughter went on a date the other day, a lunch date, and Rachel, my wife, and our executive producer, made a joke, and she said, "Make him pay," and she said, "No, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. We're Gen Z, we can't do that." Then she said, it's a red flag if I expect him to pay. She goes, but then she goes, it's also a red flag if he doesn't offer to pay, but I can't take him up on it. And I was just trying to figure out the whole dating thing. And I'm just glad I'm a few decades older than that. Don't have to worry about that anymore. But I was thinking about how scary it can be. Cause I just said, can't you guys just be yourself and just have like, don't maneuver? And she's like, no, absolutely not. And I was thinking when you were talking about getting in touch with your emotions, and finding comfort there and finding peace there, that can be really scary. It can be really scary to, I mean, we're not really, unfortunately, I wasn't anyway. And I don't think that most of us through our, K through 12 upbringing and, then we go right into the, college and workforce, we're not really taught to regulate. We're not really taught to be okay with ourselves. We're not really taught to be okay with our emotions. I would love to hear how music therapy, breath work can help people find that. And then also, have you found people where it's really scary for them to go there, to go to that space?
Oh yeah. Lots of my clients have to work through that fear, and we call it the resistance. It's the saboteur of our bodies and our consciousness, where we push away opportunities for health and optimization and for pleasure. Wilhelm Reich called it pleasure anxiety. And man, this is such a big thing to unpack, but earlier you talked about the vagus nerve. I'm going to try to stay focused on your question. You talked about the vagus nerve, and there's this huge knowledge that's coming out now, which is beautiful, about like the prevalence of like activating the parasympathetic nervous system and, creating the anatomically ripe environment for like anabolic rebound and like not tissue degeneration and all that cellular prevalence, right? However, what Reich brought out and taught about, and what his teachings have led my lineage and my family into, and my personal practice and breath work and music therapy, is that we can't just skirt over the hurt, the fear, okay? We can't just skirt over facing our traumas, because that's what is stuck and contracted in our musculature. It's what Reich called the body armor. It's the armoring that we put on, right? And like you brought it up from childhood, who's been raised that way? Okay, well, again, I'm not trying to tout my own experience, but I was raised screaming and crying and naked, and I was allowed to touch my genitals and masturbate, and nothing was, I wasn't a hedonist or anything like that, but we were like definitely a civilized family, but we're also super raunchy and crunchy and like just open with our human sexuality and like okay with the body. And so that's how I was raised. I was raised as a man who could cry. In fact, I cry all the time. And what happens in a lot of society is babies come out, oh, don't touch your genitals, that's dirty. Don't slap the hand away from that's just dirty. Go wash your hands, And so like we're taught right out the womb, we're taught that like, oh, well, weird. Like, why can't I touch? What's wrong with me touching it feels kind of cool, And like, but this person who was loving me told me not to do that, so it must not be. Or oh, they're making noise and they're crying, and oh, okay, hush. Oh, and what is that teaching the anatomy and the physiology of the being? It's teaching that human being that, oh, well, I'm going to redirect my innate function right now. My body wants to cry, and I'm being taught that I should probably subdue that. Okay, so that's where it's the onslaught right out the womb, dude, where we're like hushing a baby who wants to fucking cry, and we're not validating that they should just fucking cry, and we should let them cry. Why? We don't let them cry because it makes us uncomfortable. Okay, because it makes us irritable and us nervous, and it triggers our fear of our own tears and our own rage. So that's why it's perverse. But bringing it back into the armoring, you talked about the depth of the fear. So, and like the fear of our emotions. And so I want to bring it into the vagus nerve and into this idea of the parasympathetic, because ultimately we all want to be in a more regulated parasympathetic space where our nervous system is at peace and grounded, and we're ripe and primed for like homeostasis. However, if we don't deal with the shit and the hurt, and we don't scream and cry, whatever it is that needs to come out, and we don't face those things, we're just still keeping them stuffed, and we're still creating a really ripe bed for disease and pathology to develop, psychologically or physiologically. So what Reich does in a lot of my practices in breath work, and there's other holotropic and there's other mouth-based practices. And so the reason why mouth-based is important is because there's a huge split in the pedagogy of breath work, like where we want to do nose breathing and mouth breathing isn't healthy. And it's true. I agree with it that like nose breathing should be our normal go-to state of homeostasis and a regulated nervous system. But the mouth breathing is the get better faster. Okay, because it's the get better faster, because you have to face the tumult in order for your body to be best equipped and best primed to really lean into that parasympathetic homeostasis. Because if you just go straight to the parasympathetic homeostasis and you let fear push you away from facing the hurt, then that hurt is still there, and the pathology is still there. The potential to develop cancers from that trauma is still there. So the mouth breathing activates the sympathetic nervous system. And when we activate the sympathetic nervous system through really fast, robust, deep oxygenation, not as a normal constant thread in our normal day of life, but on an intentional conscious breath focus, where it's like once a week, I'm going to give myself an hour of the deepest oxygenated, most rapid, fast, deep breathing through my mouth only, not through my nose, because you want to bring out the robust verbal expression. You want to create space for movement of energy through your mouth. You want to create space for empowered tears and screaming, and for laughter, or for crying and tantruming, whatever it is that comes out. And damn right, it is scary. I can't say I'm going to take away the fear, except for I'm going to be there as the practitioner to hold space and to support and facilitate that process. And if you stay with that process every week, 1 hour a week, you will find that more likely to find that homeostasis. I mean, there's never ever guarantees. But anyway, I wanted to bring up that the fear piece. And there's really no prescriptive like, oh, like I'm going to quiet your fears. No, you just got to pull yourself from the bootstraps and face your demons. I mean, honestly, it comes down to that, like, you know, and it's not, and the work that I do, so I do all kinds of work. Like some of my work is really, really gentle. And like, I take very extra care not to stoke the demon, not to create an exorcist. But when my clients are ready to take the deeper dive, you know, it is about unleashing the demons. And when you do deep breath work, it can be like an exorcist, man. And I've had clients, I mean, my mom has had clients, I haven't had anybody myself, but my mom has had clients who, you know, socked her. You know, she had, I mean, you poke the beast, you poke the bear, and in therapy, it's hard sometimes. And so we do want to like poke the bear. We do want to scratch it a little bit, say, hey, like, let's bring it out. Let's face that. And then I'm like, yeah. And the next thing, sometimes in my deep breathwork sessions, I'm screaming with them. I'm like showing them how to scream. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, scream louder. That wasn't good. Like you've got something in there you're not letting out. So it's this balance of not scaring somebody away, not pushing them away. So if you poke the bear too much, too fast, too hard, too soon, then, you know, somebody could just be like, yo, peace, I'm out. Like, I can't handle this work. Like, it's way too intense for me. So that's where someone who's been doing it their whole life, who can like help modulate that energy and figure out how we're going to work through it. And then if it's getting too intense, That's where my music therapy comes in, because now I can be like, okay, this is too scary. Let's play the drum. Let's bring it into music. Let's bring it into a piano. Let's bring it into a song. If it's, and so the reintegration and like the co-regulation that music offers, that's where I dovetail the deep, robust fear of trauma. You can bring in the music and I can support the person holistically when they are maybe too scared. Anyway, that's my spiel, bro. I don't know if it lands, if you get what I'm saying, but
well, what it sounds
I'm picking
like,
up what you're laying down.
What it sounds like is you're rewiring people's condition, and the human condition is what people represent to you.
Yeah.
And what you were saying there, I'm going to just put it into like quick language, is you tune their vagal tone. And
I don't tune it.
Well,
I empower them to tune it themselves.
Yeah. But they come in with the type of condition that they're representing, and you help them work through that. But we're talking about muscle tone, we're talking about pulse, we're talking about heartbeat. Well, the vagal tone is one of the times I tell people about the vertebrae. You have 7 in the neck, right? 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 ribs, and then you have 5 lumbar. And there's nerve innervations that come off of those. And the vagal tone starts all the way from the brain, all the way down through all of the spinal cord. And it controls all organ systems. And one of the things I like to share with people is the reason they call it an organ system, because it's organized. And when you help organize people's energy levels and you help them deliver themselves to new realities, what's happening, you take them from where they are in the state that they show up in, and you represent a new reality to them. And they find that, like you said, on their own, but you're their guide. You're the one with the torch and the scythe or the machete, and you're whacking down the path for them. But here's the real thing. The path always grows back if we don't stay true to the path. Like if we don't keep walking the path will come back, and we'll go back to that path, and we'll realize that the path has the growth back on there. So when we're thinking about people's human condition, if we don't continuously do the work with people, and people don't continuously find ways to change state and to find their tone in life, they'll come back to that path that they worked on with you, and they'll realize that even with like chiropractic, if people step away from care and they realize that now they're back into the same condition state that they were previous, if they just stuck with it and walked the path with the method, their lives would not go back to where it once was. Mm-hmm. So I know that there's a lot of theory there, but when I'm talking about this is, I know we're coming up on the edge of our time too, but I have 2 questions. They're kind of a compound thing here. How do you see the evolution of your work going forward? And will you eventually teach this to other people?
Yeah, so I see the evolution of my work going forward, to doing more retreats and more wellness integrative retreat opportunities that blend music making and group drumming. And I'm already doing them. I'm doing about 3 retreats a year right now. And I see myself continuing to grow that. And I see myself staying on with music therapy and having individual one-on-one music therapy clients, because I just love the work and I love being in service in that capacity. But I've really since my mom died in 2016, I've been on this slow trajectory of where I'm leaning more and more into the breath work. And I really do want to keep growing and evolving my work as a breathwork practitioner as well. And that is going to involve possibly some new learning opportunities. I'm super into a few different areas for professional development and growth that I want to integrate and learn and develop and blend into my work. And in terms of teaching others, I absolutely want to teach people more about the work that I do. And teach them how to actually carry on this particular flavor of breath work that I am equipped to support people with. And for example, this weekend, a little plug there, because I'm doing it. I'm a guest teacher at a teacher training in Occidental, California on this Saturday and Sunday, October 18th and 19th. It's a 2-day nervous system reset and Reichian breathwork and pranayama yoga teacher training. And it's actually just one weekend of like a nine-month teacher training. And I'm doing that with my mentor and godfather. He was my mother's lover for 8 years. He's also a Reichian therapist, and he studied with the same teachers my mom did. So he's a part of my family. And when my mom died, he took me under his wings. And his name is Dr. Siri Giancarlo. And we are doing teacher training in Occidental. So we are. And the thing is that like the best way to train on being a breathwork therapist is to be in breathwork every week, once a week.
I love that.
Yeah, and that was just it. Is there's a lot there, you know, and I was just really curious about the fundamentals of what you know, because obviously you garnered a lot from the lineage that you come from, 3 generations of Reichian breathworkers, and now you're the music therapist guy. So
I brought music to it.
Yeah.
My teachers did not bring music therapy to it. Yeah.
No, yeah, but now you've seen the evolution, and that's why I'm asking. Like and once again, we're almost to the edge of our time today.
Yep.
But I do want to take a brief moment. Would you mind taking 1 minute with us as a collective and putting us through a minute breathwork exercise before we close out the show today?
Sure. Because I do come from this place of activating the mouth breath, and it's not as conventionally practiced in a lot of the breathwork spheres. Let's practice just taking a big breath through an open mouth. One of the hardest things to do is to do this. Yeah. And so we'll be like, okay, take a deep breath through your mouth, and the mouth goes like this. But it's so hard to force your body to keep your mouth open. So take a big deep breath in through an open mouth, and we're just gonna do 5 of them, okay? And when we take a deep breath, I don't wanna see this. I wanna see as little movement in the shoulder shrug as possible, because where we take our deepest breath is when our diaphragm pulls our lungs down. So I want us to start by breathing into the diaphragm and pelvis. And then once the pelvis and the stomach has fully expanded, if you still have more air capacity to inhale, then you bring it up into your chest. So it's gonna be Good. 3 more. 2 more. Last one, as deep as you can into your stomach. Good. That right there, man. That I would call that the get better, faster ingredient to breath work, is being able to breathe with a fully open mouth, as big as you can, as deep as you can into your stomach, as like a prescriptive tool to like unlock the hurt.
Well, that was really powerful, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. I love the fact that you could share something with us and our audience, and they're going to learn something to take away from our episode today. I thought our conversation was super dynamic. I'm just going to pass over to Dr. Jason and see if he has any last words for today's episode.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I genuinely mean that. Thank you for your time, for your genius and sharing that. And it's so cool to have this connection and to, talk through some of this. Someone that's doing, novel breath work anyway, and then incorporating music therapy into that as well. I mean, I don't personally know anyone else doing that. So, I mean, you're a unique genius all by yourself. And I can't wait to see, where this evolves. I'm excited for it. I also just want to give a shout out. We didn't even talk about how we met. We met in, what's it called? The Freak Alley.
Freak Alley.
Yeah, Freak Alley,
Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho, which is a really cool, murals and street art. And Ian was there with Ben Lewis, I believe, with Flo the band. and you were recording, I think it was a music video. And it was, I mean, we just kind of invaded you guys and listened, and then, accosted you a little bit, like, who the heck are you? What are you doing? And then we got to know each other. And I just want to give a shout out that your music also, we didn't even get a chance to hear it, but your music is genius as well. And people should check it out, so check it out. We'll give all the links in our show notes when we get the show out. So check out our show notes. We'll give all the links to Ian's music and, how to connect with him. So thank you again.
We're going to drop our first full band single on October 31st on Halloween.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah. I can't wait.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Ian. It's been totally transformative for not only us, but for our listeners. And for our listeners, if you're struggling with emotional blockages, trauma, or you're looking for a holistic approach to healing that goes beyond traditional talk therapy, Ian's integration of music therapy and breathwork offers something truly unique. As you can see with our exercise at the end of the show today, there's some powerful techniques that Ian has. I hope he does decide to teach and facilitate and train people, because he did talk about the scarcity of the practitioners in the world. So I think there's a big opening for him. But his work with teens, adults, and special needs populations shows real results. And over 1,000 clients served and 14,000 clinical hours don't lie. Remember, anyone listening, nobody's come to save you. But solutions like Ian's breathwork and music therapy prove you can save yourself. Ian, thank you again for sharing your wisdom with us today. And to all you all, our Get Better Faster Nation, thank you for listening and your continued support. And the best way to show your support is share this episode with somebody who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and get all the behind the scenes hijinks we've got coming your way. We've got more incredible guests lined up that are going to blow your mind, just like Ian did today, with real life solutions for reclaiming your health, your happiness, and your life. Until next time, keep questioning everything and keep getting better faster. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Wilkerson. It was a real powerful episode today. Thank you, Dr. Jason Bradley, for facilitating this episode today with me. And we are signing off, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Love everybody.
Thanks for tuning into the Get Better Faster podcast. Join the movement and visit getbetterfasterpodcast.com to find all our episodes, micro content, and resources to help you and your family get better faster.